Now that Luminar AI Update 4 is out, there's an enhancement to the texture tool under local masking. And I thought I'd show you just a little bit of what we can do with that. So this is going to be one more how to replace a background in Luminar AI video. Hi, my name is William Beem. I'm a photographer just like you. And sometimes I like to do a little bit of compositing rather than traveling out to a location. And this is one of those times. I'm going to show you a shot right here. So you see this photograph? I'm in Orlando, Florida. We don't have mountains. We don't have snow. What we do have are plenty of white backdrops. So we can take a photo of somebody on a white backdrop or a light gray backdrop like this. And then now with Luminar AI and the local texture masking, we can do something like this. So let me show you how I put this together. It's much simpler than you think. It might take a little bit of patience and you're going to have to match your background with your subject. But let me show you what I did and the kind of things that you can look out for. So the first thing I want to do is come down here and I'm going to reset the adjustments on this. So I'm going to make sure I've cleared off that texture. So we come under local masking. You can tell that's the second icon on the right-hand side. And you're going to click on add. And we're going to click on basic texture. Now, I want to let you know before I do this, you could have alternatively come in here to tools and maybe you've gone into some of the portrait tools like, Face AI in case you want to add some light to their face, whiten their teeth, or enhance their eyes. I decided to do that after I did the background because it gave me a better view of how it was going to look with the background. So we'll come back to this a little bit later. So let's go to local masking, add texture. Now the texture can be anything. So I've got a couple of textures down here that I've already used. If I click on custom, this is where I can add an individual texture. And you can see that I've got, this one is like a canvas backdrop. This one is a metallic finish backdrop. This one is way out in outer space in the universe. And this one is just a scene of a nice mountain view. So it starts off with the opacity at 50%. The advanced settings are shut. I want to open this up. I'm going to bring the opacity all the way over to 100% because that's the view that we ultimately want. And I'm going to change the blend mode to multiply. Now it looks weird on them, but if you look at the rest of the background, it looks perfectly fine because it's just over that white background. The thing I like about working this way is all you really have to do is brush the center and then carefully look at the edges. And most of the edges in this case aren't going to be too much of a problem with this particular couple and with this particular photo. So let me show you what I mean. So what I need to do is come over here to this icon and I want to erase. And I'm going to be erasing from the inside out. And I'll probably make this a little bit bigger for the larger part. And you can see in the center of this little radius here of the brush, it has a minus. I can hit the option key and that'll change it to plus. So you can swap back and forth or you can click the icons on the screen. But all I really want to do is just start brushing away in the center. I'm not going to really be trying to touch the outlines. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, that's where you need a little more attention to detail. And two, it may not matter. And that depends upon your subject and how they look. So that's why we start with the easy part, going inside and seeing if the edges really matter that much. So you can see like they're on her arm that's going around the man. You can see the trees. When I let up on the brush, that's where it's kind of coming off. So it's not exactly showing you at the moment. And that could be because I've got an old computer that's a little bit slow, or maybe I just have to stop brushing long enough for those parts of the background texture to fade away. So I'm going to come over here on her jeans, the bottom of his t-shirt, and I'm approaching the edge, but not getting there. And this is why I'm using a brush with a really big feather. So you can see your radius is the size of the brush. Your softness is the feather. As I bring this in, you can see how the edge gets harder. I kind of want to go with a big feather here. The opacity, I'm going to bring up to 100%. So that way it seems like there's a little bit still on his face and her face. I want to make sure that I'm brushing this interior part at 100% so there's no bleed through from the photograph. And then I will start looking at like things over here on his shoulder. You can see because of his t-shirt, it's kind of allowing the photograph on the texture to bleed through. And I'm not going to be 100% perfect here, but it's going to be kind of close enough. And I'm going to make my brush a little smaller and come over here and just get these parts that are still bleeding through. Now you notice on his arms, there's a little bit of a highlight there. That's where we're going to go back and change that around with a different brush when we're going to brush some stuff in. And now I'm going to come over to his other arm and kind of work the same little bit of magic. So I'm going to be brushing away over here to get rid of the texture that's showing up on his skin, on her shirt, and kind of places where I don't need it. Even up here on his hair, I don't need to go quite to the edges though. I'll get some on his ear. And once I've got the bulk of the work done, that's where I want to go back and say, all right, where do I need some improvement? I'd say his t-shirt over here needs a bit of improvement, but for the most part, it's kind of believable. So this is where I can say you get most of the work done, and then you worry about those little fine points. So I'm going to make my brush a little bit smaller and just kind of come in here and make sure I've got his shoulder covered, her thumbnail. And you can see that from the halo that it's going over a little bit. I'm not worried about that because I'm going to come back around on the other side with not 100% opacity and trying to brush some of that back in. So I'm going to bring my opacity down, let's say 59, 60, and I'm going to bring the size of my brush up a little bit. And I don't mind if there's a little crossover here. It might have helped if I had changed that to brush in, not brush out. And I'm just looking for those spots where there's a little bit of bleed. And I kind of want to feather them. And that's the trick. You can see where the red is over here on his shirt, but it's not 100%. And that looks pretty close. I'd say if there's a place on this particular photo where I made a mistake, it's right over here in this area, and you could work on that a little bit more. But this is also what I mean when I talk about looking at your subject versus your background. What I would rather have is have him in a different colored shirt so that it very clearly contrasts from the background over there. So that way there's not a little bit of bleed in. And I think that works much better. But if you look at her hair on the female or the male, actually, both of them seem like they blend right in. There's not a big halo around them because I didn't brush over that part. Using the blend mode is what helps you make sure that this whole thing works together with the scene that you have. The hair and the cloth, you can tell over here on this side that there's really not a big problem over there. Or same thing with her jeans. It was much easier to brush in because I didn't have to worry about trying to get to the edge of her jeans. That dark material against the white stuff, I could allow a little bit of bleed over. So I'm trying to rush through this, and I would probably take a little bit more time on just that shoulder. But otherwise, that was a pretty quick and dirty thing to do. Now, the next thing I would do is come back over here, and let's go down to look at our portrait tools. I'm not going to try and do a portrait bokeh with this, but I'll go into face. I'll give them a little bit of face light, a little bit of iris flare. I like big eyes, so I'll do a little bit of enlarged eyes, eye whitening, a touch, an eye enhancer, about halfway or so. And then we'll come down here to teeth whitening and give them just a little touch with that. And with that, we're pretty much done. If we come over here and take a look at before and after, that's where we started off. And in just a few minutes, that's where we are. And that's with me talking. I think if you sat down and did this by yourself, you'd probably have a much easier time and maybe not be so distracted by me. So that is a quick look at how you can quickly and easily replace the background if you're taking a photograph on a clean white sweep, gray sweep, something of that nature. And then you can go ahead and process the rest of the photo as you normally would. I think that there's a lot of potential here now. It is certainly much easier to replace a background than it was before. So please go ahead, give it a try. Let me know in the comments. Are you replacing a background with a scene of some kind? Are you doing it with like a canvas backdrop or a textured backdrop of something? I'm curious to know what you're doing with your portrait. If you like this video, please go ahead, click the like button. That tells YouTube we did something right. They'll share this with more people, and it helps the channel grow. Plus, it only takes a moment. Thanks so much. I'll see you again in the next video.